Hello and welcome to this round one of Grand Prix Sao Paulo. We're going to get a chance to see our very first little taste of modern magic here in Brazil. And we have Guilherme Fonseca against Rodrigo Sibin. We'll get a chance to check out what they're working with soon enough, as they've just got the go-ahead. Temple Garden to kick things off for Fonseca. He does elect to go for it untapped, and that, I guess, means there he is. It's Noble Hierarch. We're going to be off to the races on that side of the battlefield, and I think I saw a Knight of the Reliquary, so we might be having kind of a green-white theme pushed very hard here. On the other side of things, though, you love this deck, Esper. This looks to be humans. I spotted a Kite Cell Freebooter in hand, and off this Horizon Canopy, it's, well, both sides of things, we've got our Noble Hierarchs. Yeah,
the humans deck, when it has a one-drop in play to start the game, it's so much more powerful. Guilherme here adding a Knight of the Reliquary to the board. I wonder if he has a combo with it, with maybe... I forgot the
Retreat to Coral.
Yeah, that's one.
So Cavernous Soul's coming into play. I would guess that one's naming human, kind of the classic play that we see here. Very occasionally we see a couple of other things being named, but right now I think we know what's going on. Here's that Kite Cell Freebooter, and Rodrigo will now know what's going on as he sees there is a collected company. That one, a pretty straightforward one to take. Not something you see so much in regular humans, but with this Knight of the Reliquary, I think that Guilherme might be on something a tiny bit different.
Yeah, it could be the green-white value town popularized by Todd Stevens, or it could be a combo deck. Having that Kite Cell Freebooter there right on time to take the Collected Company is going to be huge for Rodrigo, for sure.
Yeah, Ether Vial coming down for Rodrigo as well. That is another way that he's going to be able to both get more permanents in play good and quick, but also he's going to be able to play creatures at instant speed. And there are some of the creatures in this humans list that being able to surprise people with can be a real pain in the neck.
Yeah, and it also fixes his mana. He can cast Angels and Illusions with it if his Noble Hierarch's dealt with.
Now, is there a key number that this humans deck is going to be wanting to leave that Ether Vial on?
I think 2 is the higher density of cards, but having it on 3 allows for more explosive turns, and sometimes you go to 4 if you have a Restoration Angel in your list.
Okay, so we got Selfless Spirit, and there we also have werewolf to have a little bit of a hunt for more creatures. Guilherme Fonseca, though, he's not really able to get useful attacks in just yet, holding back that Knight of the Reliquary so that he can gradually get lands in the graveyard, get it pumped up just a little bit. Worth noting that the humans list doesn't tend to run nearly as many fetch lands as a lot of decks in the format, so that Knight of the Reliquary is not going to get very much help from the other side of the table.
No, just Horizon Canopy there if he chooses to cycle it. From Guilherme's side, he has a Duskwatch Recruiter. For me, that's an indication that he might have a combo with Devoted Druid and Vizier of Remedies. Of course, he can generate infinite mana and then use Duskwatch Recruiter to find all the creatures or a specific creature that he wants in his deck. So that means he could be one top deck away from just comboing and getting a win.
Yeah, as things stand, Rodrigo doing what he can where he can. Mantis Rider able to attack in, pumped up by that Noble Hierarch. Fonseca dropping to 13 here on those attacks. And the Mantis Rider really the only creature that's going to be getting into the red zone right now. Thanks to Exalted, no need to get the Kite Cell Freebooter any kind of trouble here.
Oh, it's a formidable clock. That's exactly what Rodrigo needs to do. Cut the number of draw stops that Guilherme has to find his combo.
Yeah, and the fact that we're seeing more green-white sources fetched up by this Knight of the Reliquary here, suggesting that maybe Retreat to Coral Helm isn't so much part of his plan here. Doesn't need any blue mana. He can simply work on green-white. And I think you're absolutely right, Lucas, that there could easily be some kind of a Devoted Druid combo somewhere in this list. But in the short term, Guilherme Fonseca, he's just got to respect the clock that's being put forward here by Rodrigo, make sure that he doesn't fall to straightforward beatdowns from the humans.
Yeah, this deck, green-white usually doesn't have good answers to flyers, so Mantis Rider, they're absolutely huge for Rodrigo.
All right, empty-handed, Fonseca picks up his card for the turn. He's going to need it to be a pretty good one here. Selfless Spirit is a flyer, but it's only really a speed bump for what Sibin has going on. And I guess that at some point he may have to look to his ability to use Duskwatch Recruiter here if he's not drawing things naturally off the top. He has a small source of card advantage, but not tons of mana to be able to sink into it just yet.
No, his biggest restraint is going to be time. He could use Knight of Reliquary to find Horizon Canopies and cycle through his deck if he wants a collected company, or he can keep activating his Duskwatch Recruiter to find more creatures. And if he has the combo, that's the route he should go for. Attacking here doesn't look like a winning proposition. It's not a race he can win at this point.
And Fonseca, we see the pace of the game suddenly slowing right down. Previously, each player was able to pretty much go through the motions of what their deck does. The life totals, though, are the point that really means that Fonseca having to think about what he's doing here. He can't afford to just ignore what's going on the other side of the table, because I don't think that's a race that he wins.
Yeah, that's. I think that's the turn that he has to step back and think about his options. It's a critical turn of the game. Oh, he's going for the race here.
I mean, I guess that this attack's interesting. It's not like the Mantis Rider wants to block. The Kitesail Freebooter certainly doesn't want to block. So in that regard, kind of a free attack. And we do see follow-up play here from Fonseca. Walking Ballista. Okay, pretty good pickup here. The Ballista, often very potent against these humans lists. One card able to deal with multiple on the other side. And it looks like he's not immediately going to fire off counters here.
Yeah, that Ballista, it can change the race. Now he can kill the Mantis Rider, and I can see why he attacked with the Knight there. He didn't have use for extra mana anyways, and he attacked for a good chunk of damage. Guilherme, he's an old teammate of mine from Brazilian national team in 2007. He finished third at Nationals. I think someone who stepped away from the game for a few years. Now he's married, has a kid, has a new job. It's good to see him again at Grand Prix circuit. I think it's one of the features of the local Grand Prix, just keep seeing your old friends and see how they are at life and catch up.
Yeah, it becomes kind of a big social club for the players from the country where the GP actually is, and a fantastic excuse for travel for them of us that have come from slightly further afield. I'm thoroughly enjoying my first trip to South America thus far, and I'm sure I'm not the only one in this field in terms of people who are making the most of having a great opportunity to visit a new city.
Glad to hear, Tim. São Paulo is my hometown. I'm very happy to be able to show my friends, my community, and tell their stories.
All right, so we've got more 3-drops coming from CBN here. Is this going to be another Mantis Rider, or potentially, what do we have here? Reflector Mage. That one, just a very, very potent addition to the humans list. A way of interacting while also getting extra creatures on the battlefield and setting back that Knight of Reliquary for not 1 but 2 turns here.
Right, so his options there were to bounce the Walking Ballista, which means he Mantis Rider could maybe attack for a few more turns, or take out the Knight of Reliquary, which takes out Guilherme's Clock. I think it makes sense since Rodrigo's plan is to keep racing, but now his Mantis Rider could be killed, and if Guilherme can stabilize the turn after that, he can certainly present enough blockers to solve out the game and use his more powerful card advance and engines to get ahead.
I mean, I guess that bouncing the Walking Ballista gets a little bit less attractive when it can shoot down a Noble Hierarch on the way out, and then it's still going to come back and be kind of a pain later on anyway.
Yeah, he could also do 1 point of damage to Mantis Rider and then use his Spirit to block it and force a trade, maybe.
Fonseca on 7 life here. This is not a great spot for him in this game 1. Round 1, game 1. Round 1 of a GP is always the one that, assuming you don't have buys that mean that you get to delay that feeling until a little bit later, it's the one where you really want to get a win under your belt, just feel like you've started your day the right way. In comes Walking Ballista here, unafraid of what's going on the other side of the battlefield. Sending a message here, Guilherme Fonseca. I guess he always does have that selfless spirit to keep it alive if he really wants to. As it stands, it's still a 3-3 on attacks here.
Yeah, this move for me, I think it signifies that Guilherme is going to go all in the Walking Ballista. He's going to use it to pressure Rodrigo's life total, and he's probably going to pump here.
And along comes something of Ether Vial. This is one of the areas where Ether Vial gets particularly potent. Thalia's Lieutenant here would be a lovely card to put down. Pump up that Reflector Mage. Does he go for it? He's tapped the Ether Vial. It looks like he's got a couple of options. There's a Meddling Mage in hand as well here. Interesting. Looks like he tapped that Ether Vial and elected to not put anything in play here.
Oh, that's a change of mind. I think he realized as he was going through the motions that he might need to add an extra counter to the Dimensions Rider to protect it from Walking Ballista.
As things stand here now, Walking Ballista able to unlock that copy of Collected Company that was hidden away by Kitesail Freebooter. And there is 4 mana available to Fonseca here. He may have turned a corner.
Now Rodrigo is in a difficult position of having to attack through a Collected Company that he doesn't know what's going to present on the table. I think it's a safe bet that his Monster Rider might go through for damage, but after that, Guilherme is going to have a dominating Bard position.
All right, along comes Thalia's Lieutenant here. Now, while there's a Meddling Mage in hand, there's not really a good window of opportunity for him to get it into play just yet. You can be sure, though, that if Guilherme Fonseca taps down below 4 for anything other than the Collected Company itself, that's a juicy target for a Meddling Mage.
Oh, Guilherme has to be careful. I think he's going to cast Collected Company this turn no matter what, but if Rodrigo can navigate him into using his mana and something else, maybe the Meddling Mage can be a surprise factor here, but yeah, I don't see it happening.
All right, so Mantis Rider getting stuck in here. It's a big old body at this point. 3/3 the +1/+1 counter and Exalted, so 5 points of damage being threatened here. 1 point of damage coming from Horizon Canopy just to cast this Collected Company. What do we have? Plenty of potential hits in this green-white list. It looks like there is a Vizier of Remedies and an Eternal Witness.
Yeah,
I like that.
There's Shalai there as well, but he can put it into play. His Eternal Witness means he's going to have a reshot at Company next turn. But I think he's kind of pressured into blocking the Dimensions Rider with his Spirit Guide right now.
You can see the little leg jiggle there from Guilherme Fonseca. He was in a difficult spot just a turn or two ago, and things gradually turning around for him here. 13 damage to deal, certainly not nothing, but he may be able to just make his way through these next 3 attack steps. And once he's got Vizier of Remedies in play for Rodrigo, now it's a scary place to be.
Yeah, Rodrigo still has a turn. Devoted Druid has Summoning Sickness, so Guilherme is not going to combo next turn. But he's close.
I mean, I guess that if you're Sibin here, then it might be tempting to get that Meddling Mage down pretty soon just to close off that potential avenue of attack.
Oh, now is the time for it. Guilherme has a Company hand. I think he's going to cast Meddling Mage and name it. Okay, first, the Thalia's Lieutenant.
So a lot of additional counters being put onto this board here. I mean, does he have the potential to go wide here? It seems like with 6 life and 3 blockers, it ought to be that Guilherme is able to stay in this. Sorry, 4 blockers right now.
Yeah, I wonder if Rodrigo didn't make a small mistake here, maybe paying the Meddling Mage in his turn in response to the Thalia's Lieutenant trigger. Then he could do it, name Collected Company, and Guilherme wouldn't have a chance to respond. If he does it now, it might be too late. Guilherme can respond to Adder Vial activation and cast Collected Company. Yeah, he sees the line. He's not going to give Rodrigo the opportunity to put that Meddling Mage into play. Oh, as I say that, he's taking it back, so who knows?
Yeah, little pump fake there.
Yeah.
Fonseca just making sure that he's making the best play that he can at each individual moment. A strange game of information here where it's not so much about the cards on the battlefield as the cards in hand and the knowledge of the potential cards coming from each of these decks. Collected Company again coming. This could be lights out right now. I don't think that there's a Devoted Druid there. Looks like it might just be a couple of copies of Birds of Paradise.
Yeah, Birds of Paradise usually not a card you want to see at this stage of the game, but at least it's a blocker for Mantis Rider.
Yeah, buys potentially more spins of the wheel as we get into the later stages of this game.
Yeah, that's 2 extra turns right there. Now Rodrigo has to go with the go wide plan to push through damage. And the other Vial activation works. You're still at Guilherme's upkeep, I believe.
And Meddling Mage, in some respects, has an easier job figuring out what to name now, because now that Collected Company's out the way, slightly less temptation to name the spell that's going to get lots of creatures in play.
Yeah, and he still knows about the Knight of the Reliquary that the Reflector Mage bounced earlier. So that's probably what he named. We can ask confirmation.
Ancient Ziggurat the kind of necessary evil land in a lot of decks. In humans, very, very little to punish you for playing this 5-color land.
Now, we see Rodrigo cycling to the Horizon Canopy. That's actually one of the hidden strengths of the humans deck. The deck very rarely floods because of that line.
And the humans list eschewing Collected Company in order to keep its mana curve a little lower. It's not, well, it's obviously a very powerful card. It's not so easily castable when you've got Ancient Ziggurat. It's also a little bit at the high end of the curve.
While Rodrigo finds another Mantis Rider, now he has a formidable clock on the board. Guilherme is not that close to his combo because of Devoted Druid taking a turn. He's going to go all in for everything.
I like this attack. I think that if you're Rodrigo, the writing's on the wall that every extra turn that you give Guilherme is potentially just going to completely end this game. 12 life won't be enough if it works out that this combo comes for Fonseca. As things stand here, 4 very big attackers. Yes, there are some copies of Birds of Paradise that can get in the way of those flyers, but that's only a pretty temporary measure here.
Yeah, he's in chump block, top deck Devoted Druid mode, absolutely. I think it's his only out. He's just thinking carefully about what creatures he can throw away this turn and what creatures he might save for next turn.
I mean, I guess that, to me, if he throws away Eternal Witness and 2 Birds of Paradise, he can just about stay alive, and that maximizes his chances of a top deck turning this game around. And at this point, I think it has to be a pretty decent top deck. I think it has to be... I mean, I guess even Devoted Druid, it's going to have Summoning Sickness. It's not going to be enough.
It's not going to be enough. He needs maybe Collected Company to get more creatures on board and more chump blocks, but he has to block at least 2 creatures every turn, and he's already at 3 life, so he basically has to block every creature now. I don't see he's finding his out, but let's see.
Big draw step. Eternal Witness, a very powerful magic card. There is a Devoted Druid now in hand for him, but I believe it's just too late.
Yeah, maybe a turn earlier. Maybe he found that through the Collected Company. It's exactly 1 turn too late, I think.
Ultimately,
yeah, he figures it out.
Chooses not to reveal anymore. I think that both of these players having a fair idea of what's going on, but the details of these lists, there's still room for a little bit of variation there.
Yeah, I think Guilherme's deck is not as popular, so I'm not. It's something Rodrigo is used to playing against. You can see the cards that he names Meddling Mage, how important it is to know the whole modern metagame, to know every iteration of every deck list possible, what kind of advantage it can get you. But now at least he has information from game 1.
Yeah, it's interesting. We had Tobias Henker and I were having a fun little time just sort of reminiscing about the good old days of Meddling Mage, where suddenly there was value in, if you're a control deck, maybe having Wrath of God alongside a different iteration of Wrath of God, simply so that Meddling Mage not quite as powerful. And in many respects, we're kind of getting back to that place now in Modern once more, that if you can diversify the names of the cards in your deck because you know that Meddling Mage is coming along, it might be worth considering. In practice, Meddling Mage pretty much always has a good target, but you never know. Occasionally, you might get a tiny bit of value there. Yeah,
you can actually play Supreme Verdict, Wrath of God, Day of Judgment, and Terminus as your sweepers.
If you want to go down that path, I think that if you kind of want Gifts Ungiven somewhere in the mix there as well to get extra value from the fact that you've got all these different card names. But yes, there
add some Snow Covert lands, just go the whole deal.
Oh yeah, do it all. All right, these players just figuring out the details of their sideboarding, what they want to adjust with here. We mentioned at the top of the show just how important sideboarding is in this format, and we will get a chance to see how much impact there's going to be here. If I'm Rodrigo, I'm maybe thinking about the likes of, is it Staticaster? There are quite a lot of creatures that that one can mow down. And then for Guilherme Fonseca, I guess one of the difficult bits about sideboarding against humans is the best that you can really hope to achieve is to have more removal for creatures.
Right, so since humans is one of the most well-known decks in Modern, I imagine Guilherme has a plan for it. But I don't think Rodrigo is going to have a prepared plan for Green-White Collected Company. And there's a stomping ground we saw there. It's going to throw him off a little bit. So I think Rodrigo is in improvisation mode right now. I think I saw him taking out Kitesail Freebooters, which was very important that game to delay the Collected Company. But if I'm Rodrigo's seat right now, I'm kind of going through everything that Guilherme's deck could go. Should he fight the combo? Should he race in the air? Should he worry about removal spells?
I mean, Kitesail Freeboot are one of the cards that really catapulted humans into being a viable option, because in addition to the card that it snipes out your opponent's hand, it gives you all that information that makes your meddling mages that much better. It being a flying 1/2 is kind of a really nice little collection of numbers, especially once you have Exalted in the mix to make your creature a little bit larger. It's a creature that can continue to attack where various of your ground pounders just kind of get stuck. The little pirate, really important in the mix.
It's a deceptively powerful card. So humans became a deck with Ixalan on block. Part of that was Unclaimed Territories, which give you enough colored sources for humans to cast your cards. But you're absolutely right. Another huge part of that was Kitesail Freebooter and its interaction with Meddling Mage. You kind of always work with perfect information with your late game Meddling Mages. You can play evasive creature that's going to disrupt your opponent's game plan. Not forever, but just enough time so your giant humans can attack through them.
Now remind me, Lucas, at the Modern Pro Tour, I know that a lot of the Haruya players were on humans. Were you one of them?
Yeah, I was one of them. The team played a Willie's deck, which had Collected Company on it, and Avacyn's Pilgrim to accelerate into it. It just kind of, I stayed with the more stock version with either Vile. I liked playing Experiment 1 because I think 1-drops are super important in that deck. And it was the breakout deck of the Pro Tour, I think. People knew it going to show up. I don't think many people knew how big it was going to be. We saw Mengucci and I think Javier Dominguez in the top 8 with the deck. So several teams were playing humans. Just shows how powerful it is to show up for proactive strategy in an open field. You're going to win a lot of games just through attacking and a minimum amount of disruption. You don't have to know exactly what the metagame is going to look like if you're punching them in the face.
Yeah, I mean, the old, I think it was a Mike Tyson quote, everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face. And the humans deck does a pretty good job of making sure that that actually happens. I personally also love playing these sorts of decks, not necessarily always humans, but something that's trying to do something proactive. And part of the reason for that is I like at least the notion of getting a free win here and there, having a deck that can punish bad draws by being aggressive and doing something big early doors. And I know that there are the advocates of control out there that are just kind of rolling their eyes and thinking, like, have you ever sat there with 4 counter spells in hand and felt like you've just got the game locked up? And it's like, well, I have, but I've also sat having a cup of tea after my rat mound is finished because I finished with half an hour left on the clock because it all just kind of worked out for me. And that's something that bad draws happen every now and again, and I kind of want to have a deck that can punish them.
Yeah, as we were talking earlier, in Modern you can do whatever you want. I like pressuring people with light counter spells. You can do that too, and everything is viable. It's a great format.
Yeah, and you mentioned that it is very popular in Brazil, this format. Is that something that is amplified by the fact that you have a Modern GP coming up, or has it just always been one of those formats that people have loved over here?
Always been very popular. I think people like playing with the same cards over the years, and they just kind of update it every new set and maybe try something new every now and then. But it's one of the attractions of an Eternal format. If you like something, you can keep doing that, absolutely. I played a lot of PPDQs with Modern back in the days. They always had the highest turnaround. I think this Grand Prix might just be the largest ever in South America. I don't have the official numbers yet, but it's huge. It could actually double the size of Grand Prix Santiago. And as part of that, well, first is São Paulo, which is a huge city, and second is Modern, is a format people love.
Well, we're seeing a few trips to Mulligan land here. Each of these players now on 6 cards. How does the humans deck mulligan? Is it? I guess that it doesn't have a key combo, but it does want to hit lands and spells.
Yeah, so that's part of it. So mulligan in Modern, it's very important. If you play a lot of booster draft, if you play a lot of standard, you're kind of just used to see your hands, see if you have enough lands to cast them, and then you decide you're mulligan that or not. In Modern, you have to approach mulligan more strategically. A deck like humans, as I said, it's so much more powerful when it has a 1-drop into play. I think the first mulligan, at least, he should go looking for that 1-drop, especially if it's going to be on the draw. I couldn't take a good peek at Rodrigo's first hand. That might be one of the reasons. That's certainly one of the reasons how I mulligan with humans. His second hand is just lands and spells, and now maybe he doesn't want to go to 5 with that. But the first mulligan, kind of treat it as a freebie. You know, the scry rule made it so much less punishing to mulligan. It gave you another depth of strategy there. Rodrigo here now going to 5. His deck does have ways to catch up in card advantage. Collected Company is the biggest one. Also Eternal Witness to help return a land and keep hitting land drops.
I mean, as things stand, for a 5-card hand, Guilherme with kind of a monster here. He's got a Devoted Druid, he's got a Chord of Calling. He can potentially set up a very, very punishing start here.
Great 5-card hand for Guilherme. He has half the combo there, two-thirds of the combo actually. So it's Devoted Druid and Chord of Calling to pick whatever remaining pieces he needs. So he just needs one more of Vizier of Remedies or Duskwatch Recruiter or Walking Ballista potentially.
All right, as things stand, it looks like these players have now both kept. I guess that on humans, the mulligan even better because when you're scrying, you've not got the fetch lands that mean that scry is kind of irrelevant.
Yeah, it's one of the downsides of the new scry rule. Fetch lands and Bomat Career. Everyone gets surprised when they scry card on top of a magical line, cast Bomat Career and goes away.
Yeah.
And then you message the developer saying, "Oh, your game's bugged." No, it happens. It happens to everyone.
All right, just waiting for this one to kick things off here in Game 2. 25 minutes left on the clock. Oh, a little less, I guess. These guys should be able to get through that very neatly. Going with the Beta Forest there, Guilherme Fonseca. I like that. Maybe even Alpha there, looking at those corners. Noble Hierarch coming down for Sibin here off the Unclaimed Territory, naming human, of course. And Wooded Foothills quickly fetching the second land for Fonseca. And we're going to see that quick Devoted Druid. And this will send alarm bells ringing for Rodrigo Sibin. So
Guilherme, he had an interesting decision. He could lead with one of his fetch lands and potentially get Revenue Cadio into play tapped, and he wouldn't take extra damage. But he chose to go with the basic. For me, probably is because he's going to keep more lands in his deck, which makes him more likely to top deck an extra land. So for me, that indicates he's looking to hit his land drops beyond the lands he has in hand. And he found a Collected Company, I think.
Collected Company, another very potent combination alongside Devoted Druid. That mulligan, double mulligan, mulligan to 5 may just not be an issue in the slightest if it's a good Collected Company hit. Fonseca here hitting back hard in Game 2. And it's a Meddling Mage coming down for Sibin who has no information. He's going to have to do the blind call. If he hits here, it will be gigantic, but it's by no means guaranteed. 2 very potent cards in Fonseca's hand. He can't get both of them.
So Rodrigo had the option of casting Immensius Rider that and start attacking right away, but he went with the Meddling Mage. For me, this shows his respect for the potential of combo for Guilherme. He's going to do it. He's probably going to name Collected Company or another combo piece with it. He knows that when he's on the draw, he needs to stop his combo first and attack second instead of just go and attack to the right away. That's good strategic decision by Rodrigo, I think.
And Fonseca here. One of the cool things, I guess, about fetch lands that we forget about sometimes, if you know that you've got a search card in your hand, like a Chord of Calling, it lets you look through your deck first, get a feel for what your options are without having to rely entirely on memory.
Oh, everybody does that.
So, Chord of Calling. So Vizier of Remedies was the card named with Meddling Mage. That stops the card from being cast. It does not stop it from being put into play with Chord of Calling.
And infinite mana, he's going off.
What can Guilherme Fonseca do with all of the green mana in the land, because there's no way of putting additional -1/-1 counters on. He uses Eternal Witness to get back Chord of Calling. So now he's going to be able to search through his deck for whatever he wants, and something like Ronus the Indomitable is frequently the way these things close themselves out.
So that's a Duskwatch Recruiter. He's going to look for a Walking Ballista and then use infinite mana to shoot. Yeah, he got it. Wow, what a fantastic mulligan 5 from Guilherme. Through a Meddling Mage, finds the combo in turn 3. Shows the power of that Collected Company deck.
Yeah, so that was a multi-5 going off through Disruption. I mean, I don't think that Rodrigo made a bad choice naming the Vizier with his Meddling Mage. Ultimately, though, it wasn't able to be enough to stop the full combo on turn 3 on the play from Guilherme Fonseca. Fantastic start from him. He levels things up, and with 20 minutes left going into Game 3, he now has to feel he's got every chance to win this match.
Wow, amazing. Okay, so now Rodrigo is considering bringing back a couple of Kitesayer freebooters. Maybe he figures that when he's on the play, he has a larger chance of taking away a Collected Company of Short Calling before Guilherme has the option to cast it.
I mean, I guess that in game one, what Rodrigo saw from Fonseca seemed like kind of a mid-range deck that happened to have the combo. Once you see Court of Calling in the mix as well, suddenly that combo feels like a much bigger piece of that puzzle.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he took out, is it Statcaster? So he just figured, yeah, I got to disrupt him. And I'm not going to do that by killing his creatures. I'm going to go by stopping his powerful green spells.
And these players shuffling up pretty briskly now. They're just keen to carry on playing. I think they both, once you've both got one game win under your belt, you're like, right, let's get my first match of the day and get this Grand Prix started correctly.
Yeah, if I'm on Guilherme position right now, I have to be feeling good, right? You have your back against the wall, you're in mode 5, you find a win in turn 3. Fantastic.
I mean, that is one of the things that when you're looking at your 6-card hand, and it's kind of okay. Like it's got lands and spells, you can do things, but you don't feel like you've got a winning hand. When every now and again you actually do take the multi-5 and you do get rewarded and you are able to just close out that game from nowhere.
Yeah, that is the strategic depth of Mulligan. That's a very underrated skill in Modern, and you see the more successful players, they approach Mulligan that way.
Yeah, and I guess that when you have the potential for something explosive, the allure of going down to lower cards gets a little bit higher. Guilherme, he's got a deck that he doesn't necessarily need 7 cards to win the game. We've seen that demonstrated in the clearest possible fashion in that last game. It's much more important that he finds the synergy that he needs, and Rodrigo here looking at a hand with a lot of land in it and not very much action at all.
Yeah, I was going to say I agree with that. It was 5 lands, Ether Vial, and a 3-drop. Even though Ether Vial is a fantastic card, you still need creatures to put into play with it. So it made sense. Guilherme doing his thing in Mulligan more as well.
Yeah,
keep it fair.
Yeah, these guys going, well, if we're going to show you shuffling on camera, we're going to show you lots of shuffling on camera. Both going down to at least 6 for the second time in this match. Not ideal, but if you can win off the mulligans, oh, it's just the sweetest.
Yeah, both players going to 6. I think it favors Guilherme, as we just saw in that game. Rodrigo still needs a critical mass of creatures to apply pressure, while Guilherme can win out of nowhere, even though his combo does take multiple pieces.
We have got other matches in our feature match area. We're hoping to bring you a little bit more magic, depending on exactly how the timings go between these various games. And of course, once we get to round 2, we will have the powerhouse pairing of Paulo Vitor Damarosa and Riley Knight, bringing you more Modern. So do not go anywhere. Enjoy every moment of this Modern weekend that we bring you from Sao Paulo, Brazil. Tim Willoughby here alongside Pro Tour winner Luis Esperberto. And we're going to get a chance to see, well, we've seen a scry from Guilherme. He's happy with his 6.
I think his hand's all Noble Hierarchs in Church of Callings. So he has the potential. So that's 2 out of 3 combo pieces, and the Noble Hierarchs makes sure he's going to cast them on time.
Yeah, Noble Hierarch coming down for Rodrigo. It's going to be
great start.
A similar one for Guilherme. He's actually found the Devoted Druid on his very first draw. That was the scry to the top, so we may see another very, very quick game here in game 3 between these two. Starts things off literally exactly the same as before. Fetch land into that black bordered forest from the very start of the game, celebrating the history of Magic 25 years this year, and it may be that Fonseca is able to have, if anything, an even more powerful start than we saw in the last game. He gets the Noble Hierarch down on turn 1, which means that potentially he could have Hierarch and Devoted Druid on turn 2. His Court of Callings that much more potent. This is a rough old spot for Rodrigo here.
Yeah, Guilherme is showing the turn 3 kill again. Rodrigo needs Disruption, he needs Smelling Mages, and his Kitesail Freebooters that he sideboard back in his deck, showing that was a wise decision after all.
All right, so Thalia Heretic Cathar, this one potentially does have a bit of an impact here. Non-basic lands coming into play tapped, creatures coming into play tapped for Fonseca. Depending on exactly what the mix of lands in hand is here for Guilherme, it might work out a little bit tricky, but the turn 1 Noble Hierarch means that even that, he's not going to be able to stop this turn 2 Devoted Druid.
Yeah, it's not going to slow down Guilherme's combo that much. Devoted Druid has Summoning Sickness, so was not going to do anything this turn anyways. And next turn, he just can go Vizier, Chord, and find a skill, Rodrigo needs to find a Meddling Mage right now. And he does. Now he has named the right card with it right now.
He can play a Meddling Mage this turn.
It's a tough spot.
He can potentially play another Meddling Mage next turn as well if he's still alive. But for Rodrigo here, he's got the disruption. It's going to be so painful if, in spite of having it, he still can't find a way of eking out the win here.
Oh, it's a very difficult decision for him. So Collected Company is a more powerful card. Does he go for the Chart of Calling, which Guilherme has in hand? I don't know how he can make that decision blindly. Yeah, Rodrigo needs to take his time now. It's a critical turn for him. Naming the right card could be the difference between winning or losing the game.
I mean, I guess that if you name Collected Company, then if there's a Chord of Calling, you flat out lose.
Right.
If you name Chord of Calling, even if there is a Collected Company, you might just dodge that bullet.
Yeah, right. So for me, I don't know. I think I'm biased because I already saw Guilherme's hand. I think I might have called the Collected Company there. The fact that Rodrigo lost too short of calling last game might influence his decision.
I mean, you can also start trying to second guess how many copies of Chord of Calling you think they might run. I feel like Collected Company is a clear 4. Chord of Calling, there are some lists that only run 3, and like at some point you can really get in your own head on these decisions. We're going to get a chance to find out now exactly what is bouncing around in Rodrigo's head right now. He plays the Meddling Mage.
All right, can we get a piece of paper?
Yeah, if we can.
I guess if Guilherme's cast it, we know what he names.
And I think there's a Worship in hand here for Fonseca. That another interesting deep cut in terms of the sideboard cards available in this format. Depending on how much enchantment removal there is for humans, Worship might be effectively a hard lock against this list.
Well, you're absolutely right, Tim. I don't think Rodrigo is going to bring in Reclamation Saint blindly against that deck. Wow, what a great piece of technology by Guilherme.
So the humans list, unlikely to have ways of killing all of the creatures on the other side of the battlefield, unlikely to have ways of removing that enchantment. Does he have life loss, maybe? And this is a very, very difficult card for any humans list to deal with in the dark, especially in a game 3. If it were game 2, then at least there would be a chance to go back to sideboard. But in game 3, this Worship might be lights out.
A blast from the past that Guilherme found. It's game 3. Rodrigo is very unlikely to have an out for it. He's still going to attack, he's still going to clog the board, and maybe try to find a draw. It would take some very next level thinking by Rodrigo to bring in enchantment removal for game 3 after seeing the cards he saw in game 1 and game 2. So that's the advantage of Guilherme choosing a deck that's a little bit off the meta and choosing the perfect card for this week. He knew humans was going to be popular. We talked about earlier on how he was going to have a plan for that. That's his plan. And Rodrigo is going to be blindsided by it, absolutely.
Now, Rodrigo did name Chord of Calling, and he has stranded 2 copies of Chord of Calling in Fonseca's hand, which is fantastic choice. Obviously, the game would already be over had he named literally any other card in Magic the Gathering. Well, however, there's an argument to say that with Worship, the game's over anyway. If a creature, if you control a creature, damage that reduces your life to less than 1 reduces it to 1 instead, and that makes life very, very difficult. Fonseca, he's up 1. He can afford to just ignore any damage from here on out as long as he can keep creatures on the battlefield. And
he has 11 minutes to find his combo.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, it is the clock that is probably the thing that he's most afraid of rather than damage, because that Worship in play, I don't believe it's going to be going anywhere. I mean, what, 2 his ecstatic casters could deal with everything that he's got on the battlefield, but if he just plays any creature with a toughness of 4, I don't know how he loses this game.
Yeah, and I think Rodrigo sided out his static casters for game 3. Green-white prison for Guilherme Fonseca puts him in a great position to win this game. At a minimum, he has a draw. I think he has the time to find his combo. There are only so many Reflector Mages and illusions to copy that Rodrigo can play, but yeah, just going through the motions, casting his spells, going to turn, kind of like playing like Lantern.
So Fonseca finds an Eternal Witness. He's got that and a Vizier Remedies in hand. No real need to play the Vizier out until he's got a way of utilizing all of the mana that it represents. And Rodrigo having another read of Worship. That the version printed in Urza's Saga. It is legal in Modern. It was printed in 7th edition. And indeed, I think 9th edition it was in.
Either 8th edition. 8th edition is the set that has all the egregious cards, right? The Blood Moon, Urzatron, Worship. So that's probably from there, if we were going to guess.
But yeah, Worship, just an incredible choice. It's a card that I've been tempted by in all sorts of sideboards over the years. Not very often that you find the trigger actually getting pulled on it, and this is exactly the kind of matchup, and it being game 3 especially, that really gives it the full opportunity to shine.
Yeah, we can see here both players, they're playing their turns at a reasonable pace. Rodrigo is being a good sport about it. He's not going to try to draw time. He's not going to make useless attacks, anything like that.
Ghost Court of the play. So this is just Guilherme just building up his mana where he can. There's quite a lot of live draws here for Fonseca in terms of what he could immediately win the game with. He has Vizier of Remedies in play. Right now there's nothing to stop him from playing it. There's only one Meddling Mage in play, and it is naming Court of Calling. And once any kind of win condition comes into play, so if he draws into a Walking Ballista, this game's all over. If he draws into a Court of Calling, that's going to be stuck in hand, but at least a Collected Company could find him something, though I guess Collected Company can't find him the Walking Ballista.
No, but it can find Eternal Witness that brings back the Walking Ballista from graveyard that it can put there with the Collected Company.
So Kitesail Freebooter revealing that there's already an Eternal Witness. Takes a Court of Calling with Kitesail Freebooter. It's all he can take, even though it's not castable right now for Guilherme. It's still the only option available to him.
Yeah, Duskwatch Recruiter, of course, is another live draw for Guilherme.
8.5 minutes left for Fonseca to find one of, I'm going to say, about 10-11 cards that will immediately win him the game here.
Yeah. Neither, yeah, sure. I think Guilherme should play his turns maybe a little bit faster. I mean, his only way to lose the game is to... his only way to not win the game and force a draw is if it takes too long, so he should speed up his piece of play.
Yeah, I mean, we're operating under the assumption this Humans list doesn't have enchantment removal in game 3. I think that's relatively safe. So yeah, bundle through your turns a little bit. If it works out that you have slightly less power on the board, I don't think that that's going to be the determining factor here.
Yeah, Guilherme, of course, has a lot more experience with this deck than I do. Maybe he's trying to figure out what kind of outs.
Anyone does.
Yeah.
Depending on exactly how off the wall his exact list is.
So you can see how careful he's being. He's not playing his Vizier right away. He's not playing his Eternal Witness right away. He's just kind of holding things in hand, trying to play around things that Rodrigo could possibly have. And when I think he finds his skill pieces, he's going to cast both. So yeah, Knight is going to thin through his deck, maybe find a Horizon Canopy, which is going to accelerate his number of draw steps.
Kessig Wolf run the pickup there.
Oh, that's another kill card.
If he can find a red mana with the Knight of the Reliquary, then yeah, that one will just close the game out in one big swing.
Yeah, and I think he has a fetch land in play. He can find a Stomping Ground. So now he has infinite mana, and he can pump his creature to an arbitrarily large number with Trample. So that should be enough.
I like this a lot. So he's using the... he may want to...
Yeah, he has a Birds in Paradise too, so
oh yeah,
that's his
perfect.
red mana.
Not going to get caught up by fetching a dual land that produces red, but having it come into play tapped.
Yeah.
So here's the Vizier of Remedies. Vizier of Remedies means that now those Devoted Druids, they can't have a -1/-1 counter on them, but that doesn't mean they can't get untapped, and that means infinite green mana available to Guilherme Fonseca. That alongside Kessig Wolf Run, X red-green, target creature gets plus X power and trample. If we said, I don't know, 10,000 just to be safe, 10,000 additional power for a creature with trample. I guess that you want to make sure that you put it on a creature that has more than 1 point of toughness, just in case there was some way that there was going to be an Staticaster flashed in, but
or a Gut Shot.
Yeah, Gut Shot's certainly the potential. Like, no reason to lose to something silly here. Though, to be perfectly honest, if his creature gets killed, he can just do it again next turn.
Yeah, Knight of the Reliquary is the creature he chose to go for the win.
Kessig Wolfrun, there you see it.
Yeah, he's demonstrating infinite mana, and now he's going to activate Kessig Wolfrun. Good stuff by Guilherme.
Yeah, I like this a lot. There's the handshake. Fonseca picking up the win with 5.5 minutes left on the clock. He gets to put the W in the column, maybe just go freshen himself up before he plays his second round of Magic here at Grand Prix Sao Paulo. These players just sort of talking about how, that Meddling Mage, had it named anything else in that game, we would have seen a very, very quick Game 3 indeed, much like our Game 2. Rodrigo learned his lesson in Game 2 in some respects, but I don't think that anyone in Magic would have thought of Worship as being a card worthwhile to bring in enchantment removal for, because that's just not what you expect to see from these kind of green-white lists.
Yeah, Rodrigo played that Game 3 very well. I think I might have made a mistake there.
But yeah, ultimately it was very straightforward. Once Worship was in play, it was just a matter of working your way through, biding time, and that was exactly what happened. Congratulations there, because that was not just a win based on execution of plays in-game. That was a game that got won weeks, potentially months ago, when Guilherme was figuring out exactly what to put in his sideboard. But we will get a little bit more Magic for you soon enough. Do not go anywhere, because we have more from Grand Prix Sao Paulo after these messages. Hello and welcome back to Grand Prix Sao Paulo. Here we are in Brazil, myself, Tim Willoughby, and Lucas Esperberto. We are bringing you as much magic as we can, a little bit of modern for this weekend for you, and fantastic play in that game that we've already seen live. Lovely to see Worship getting its time in the sun and ultimately paying off, buying the time needed to find that Kessig Wolf run to be able to close out the game with infinite mana. You know, just why not? All the mana that you could possibly want closing out that game one. But that is not the only game of Magic that we're going to be able to bring you here, because while those players were playing their full match, Lucas, we had some other matches being taped, and that means that I'm going to get a chance to introduce you to Time Warp Magic, one of our favourite things at Grand Prix. We're going to get a chance to jump across and see a little bit of Gustavo Andrade against Juliano Souza here, and a little bit more of an explosive turn one than we saw in our first match here. Looks like we've got Affinity, Mox Opal, Welding Jar, and a Nexus in play already.
Oh, it looks like he's playing the next evolution of Affinity with Hardened Scales. It's a deck that it's another product of the Mad Mind of Matt Nass and Sumperdy. They stay at the laboratory, bringing up their next creation to terrorize Modern. Juliano is a former player that used to play a lot of Magic Online. There used to be a running joke that the best player nobody knows about is a Brazilian or Russian player from Magic Online. I think for the better part of the last decade, that guy might have been Juliano. He's a very talented player. I know guys like PV and Thiago speaks highly of him. The game that he plays, I think he's very good. And when he shows up with a deck like that, I know he prepared with it. I know he knows it inside out. So I think that's a Steel Archbolt Ravager. Yep.
You know that someone's really into their deck once they start using masterpieces. Arcbound Ravager coming down, but Utopia Stroll on turn one for Andrade means that his Ponza list will be able to start blowing up lands from the very second turn of the game. Now, how much of a problem is this for Juliano? Hard to say just yet, because he does have Mox Opal, he does have the potential for being able to be explosive even without very many lands, but at some point he's going to feel the pain if there's, I don't know, a Stone Rain here, a Molten Rain there, here we go, there we go, all of those lands in the graveyard.
Yeah, Gustavo's plan of land destruction is not at its best in this matchup. I think he's going to rely on his sideboard here. Juliano, this version of Affinity, it's not as explosive as the version we usually see. It's a little bit more resilient, so maybe that's the out Gustavo needs. If Juliano doesn't have another good payoff for Artifact here, and Gustavo has a removal spell for the Nexus there, he could take the win.
I mean, I guess that in a field where you think that people might be playing around against Crackline Ironworks decks, suddenly adjusting your Affinity deck to be more of a straightforward beatdown list that isn't as impacted by Stony Silence, say, it's kind of an interesting take on things.
It's hard to break Hardened Affinity with just removal spells. It plays Hangerback Walker and Walking Ballista, Archbolt Ravager, Archbolt Worker, all cards that do something even when they die. So the deck just keeps attacking, keeps putting pressure, keeps always something on the board.
Now 2 copies of Arcbound Ravager in play, those both the Masterpiece versions, just 1 counter on them thus far, but depending on how things go in the mid stages here, there's the potential to go all in on one or other of those Ravagers for more damage if it is needed. Welding Jar, of course, keeping either of them safe right now. Tireless Tracker joined by a Bloodbraid Elf, and Molten Rain here, the card that's come down, and that's going to be enough to destroy a non-basic land and deal 2 damage in the process.
Right, so Gustavo has a potentially big attack right now. Juliano can present a blocker, but it would take sacrificing a lot of his artifacts to do it. Yeah, Gustavo absolutely should attack here. Let's see the direction Juliano goes. So he could sack one Ravager to the other and add more counters to it, or he can just chump block. No, he's going to go with the route where he has a blocker. Of course, that line is a little bit safer because the Welding Jar is not putting all his chips in only one creature. He gets to save it for another turn. And you can see like how fast Juliano made that decision, and it shows really how prepared he must be with this deck.
Yeah, I think that this is a great example of just because your opponent doesn't necessarily know the deck so well. This is a comparatively new deck within the metagame. Does not mean to say that the pilots that you see it won't have a very good idea of what's going on, at least if they're some of the originators of the list or early adopters of the list, shall we say. basic lands here coming from Souza. They're unusual for an affinity list. That Walking Ballista coming along. Walking Ballista, the one common factor that we've seen between decks in our feature match area thus far beyond basic lands.
Yeah, and you can see how Giuliano at any point in the game can move all his counters to that Walking Ballista and potentially fireball Gustavo out of nowhere.
1 point of poison dealt thus far. Unlikely to be too many added to that, given that there's already Inkmoth Nexus in the graveyard. Darksteel Citadel, while it is indestructible, that does not mean to say it can't get eaten by your own Markbound Ravager. That's exactly what's happened there.
Yeah, right. So I've been talking about Giuliano and how good he is. I just want to highlight he made top 4 at Grand Prix Santiago a few months ago. And I was kind of by his side as that top 4 was announced. He wasn't sure if it was a lock. And he was so overwhelmed with emotion. It meant so much to him to be back on the Pro Tour with his friends and trying to be good at Magic again. I think he's someone that we might see a lot of today. We might see a lot of him at next Pro Tour. He's just a really, really strong player.
And of course, Grand Prix, a really important path to the Pro Tour for a lot of Brazilian players. Travel to one Grand Prix, get that top 8 or top 8 equivalent in terms of your finish, and you can potentially find yourself playing and then even winning a Pro Tour.
Yeah, right. You can get to the Pro Tour by the RPDQ circuit or the Grand Prix. Grand Prix feels like a shortcut. 8 invitations, it's a lot. It matters a lot. It's why this tournament is so important for players here.
So again, we see Giuliano Souza here, very comfortable with aggressively using his Arcbound Ravagers to get the counters where he needs them most. Right now, where he needs them most is this Walking Ballista. It's going to get to attack in here and then potentially threaten more damage wherever he so needs it.
All of that is made possible by that Welding Jar. 0 mana artifact, you don't give too much credit to it, but you can see how he was able to choose the most aggressive line because he has that Welding Jar insurance. Last turn, if he chose to make that block and Gustavo had a Lightning Bolt, he would just lose his creature.
Yeah, the regeneration shield offered by Welding Jar, very, very useful. And of course, as a 0-cost artifact, it plays nicely with the likes of Mox Opal and similar. Evolutionary Leap here coming from Giuliano Souza. That a nice way that for things like his Arcbound workers, of killing them off, finding more creatures in the process, getting the triggers from all of the...
yeah, that's usually one-off in those deck lists. You can see how powerful that card is against decks like Blue-White Control or Jeskai Control or the Mardu Pyromancer. If you're always getting value of the creature when they're throwing removal at it, you can't lose the game. For this game specifically, maybe Giuliano just wanted something else on the board so he can attack or present a blocker here.
Well, Stone Rain on Forest means that there's only 1 mana source available for Souza, and Arbor Elf coming along mean even more mana for Andrade's
Yeah, that's a kill. So, going to create a little blockers, attack for 4 damage, and then you use counters for Walking Ballista to finish Gustavo off. Walking Ballista, look, if you're not used to playing against that card, it's going to get taxed for a lot of damage. It's like having double strike in the turn where it kills you.
Well, the wonders of Time Walk Magic, we do get to jump across to game 2. Andrade did not start with 1 poison there. We don't have the opportunity to fix that, unfortunately, because we're moving in Time Walk land. This happened a little while ago. You can see still 36 minutes left on their clock, even though we're pretty close to the end of the round here in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Turn 1 Hardened Scales, though, for Giuliano Souza. That means that any time that there's a +1/+1 counter placed on one of his creatures, he will get an additional +1/+1 counter. It's not doubled, it's just X +1. As things stand, though, the turn 2 Stone Rain coming thanks to that Utopia Spore from Gustavo Andrade, and Darksteel Citadel, the perfect land to play against this kind of strategy. 1 land in play, but it is indestructible.
Yeah, so we saw both players with their preferred starts, their preferred 1-drop. Gustavo having that land destruction spell there is exactly what he decks needs to do, but Giuliano with the perfect answer with a boosted Arcbound Worker and the indestructible land. Now this game, what I'm looking to see from Gustavo's side is what sideboard cards he could bring to turn that matchup around. We talked about how his game 1 configuration is not going to be at its best against deck like Hardened Infinity, but if he planned for it, if he had sideboards for a little, he could turn the matchup around. And of course, one of the benefits of playing a deck that is a little bit off the meta game, like Hardened Affinity, is that maybe people didn't prepare properly for it. It's going to show
or
up.
indeed at all.
Or at all, right?
Like, maybe you've prepared for Affinity, but this is very much a different beast.
Yeah, if you were one of the guys watching Matt Nass stream of it, you knew the deck existed, but you probably didn't get to play against it before this Grand Prix.
Yeah, I mean, there have been Hardened Scales decks around, even in Standard, prior to this particular innovation, but by no means widely played, or indeed particularly successful in other formats. So this is very much the new kid on the block. We see a Lightning Bolt there taking down Arcbound Worker. Not anything to move counters onto with Modular just yet. So Juliano Souza, he's not in perfect shape, but there's still plenty of time for him to do something akin to what we saw in Game 1.
Right, he's not under any sort of pressure, but you can see how having his forest destroyed early on maybe delayed him for a turn. He chose not to use his Welding Jar on the Arcbound Worker, potentially saving it for a bigger creature. And now another
Throne of Geth.
Throne of Geth, all right. So you see Hardened Scales plus Throne of Geth. That's exactly the late game of this Hardened Affinity. That's how the deck goes off. It starts adding a lot of creatures really fast.
Now, Throne of Geth, it lets you proliferate. Proliferate means you're putting the extra counters on all of your creatures or anything that's got counters on it. If your opponent's got poison counters, that works too. But you know what? Proliferate plus Hardened Scales is essentially a double proliferate, at least for all the counters you're putting on your own creatures.
And you can do it every turn.
Yeah, this is pretty scary. Yes, there's not currently any creatures or any +1/+1 counters knocking around, but the late game already very much prepared by this Hardened Affinity deck now.
Yeah, so Juliano has the engine but doesn't have the threats. Gustavo needs to start applying pressure immediately before Juliano starts drawing into his outs.
Now, Gustavo, he's not far off the 6 mana that could spell an Inferno Titan, one of the ways that these Ponza lists frequently close out games, and I believe there's even a copy of that Inferno Titan in hand right now. For now, though, he just wants to make sure that wherever possible, he is slowing down this Affinity list. A Molten Rain dealing with another Nexus there for Gustavo Andrade. He's doing what he needs to do to stay in this game. Horizon Canopy, yes, it's another land. It's a land that's going to be hurting Souza, though. And Hangerback Walker coming in immediately with 2 counters. This is one of those creatures that's a real pain in the neck once it gets lots of counters on it, and Juliano has exactly the tools to make sure that there will end being a lot of counters on it.
Yeah, that's the power of the Hardened Affinity deck. He has the engine, he has the threat, he has the Welding Jar to protect it. Gustavo, even if he plays the Inferno Titan now, it's going to be a clock, which is huge. He needs that, but it's not going to clear the board this turn. Juliano is going to untap and proliferate. So Gustavo needs 2 removal spells right now, which I don't think he has. You can see he's going through the options, trying to understand everything the cards on the table does. Of course, we can't blame him for taking a second look. Hardened Scales and Throne of Geth, really not the modern staples that he thought he was going to play against.
Yeah, Throne of Geth, I think that this is the first deck that has seriously played it in the entirety of Modern. Tap, sacrifice an artifact to proliferate. Not so terribly many artifacts in play for Juliano Souza right now, but Hangerback Walker can fix that pretty quickly.
Wow, yeah, Hangerback Walker is going to go off. Oh, Instant Grudge. Perfect.
Oh, I love it.
That's the 2 removal spells needed.
So now a few decisions for Juliano Souza here. The initial Ancient Grudge being pointed at Throne of Geth.
Right, so Juliano is going to get value out of the cards, but that value is going to be a bunch of... Well, he can protect it with Welding Jar. Okay, so Gustavo at first chose to target Throne of Geth, and now he has the flashback for an Instant Grudge. Juliano can protect the Hangerback Walker or let it go, and if you let it go, the Inferno Titan from Gustavo's hand could take back board position from him.
I mean, at some point, though, you can just pay mana to grow that Hangerback Walker, and it's growing +2/+2 each time you activate it. I don't know whether or not Inferno Titan's even going to count as a removal spell at some point.
Yeah, Gustavo chose to let Juliano untap and play his turn before flashing back his Instant Grudge.
So Ancient Stirrings here, revealing an Arcbound Ravager. Arcbound Ravager, another really scary threat, assuming that Souza can keep the mana to be able to cast it.
Yeah, I'm very interested to see how Gustavo is going to play out. So he might respond to this Arcbound Ravager with his Hardened Scales, and then Juliano is going to have the decision to protect it with the Wedding Jar or let it go. He could be tempted to let it go and just use the Wedding Jar at the last possible time. Okay, so Gustavo chose not to respond, and now Juliano is attacking.
4 points of damage being threatened here, and Welding Jar has just done incredible work for Juliano Souza for the entirety of this game. So here we see the flashback of Ancient Grudge. It's targeting this Hangerback Walker. The ideal for Gustavo here is that Hangerback Walker dies, makes lots and lots of flyers, and then he gets to shoot down a large amount of those flyers next turn with his Inferno Titan, which we think that there's a good chance will come down next turn pretty much regardless.
Yeah, but that I think that was his plan. But the Arcbound Ravager from Juliano is going to make another hurdle he has to go through. Just because, yeah, he can just add counters there.
So he's sacrificed Hangerback Walker to Arcbound Ravager, creating 2+1/+1 counters.
Right, now he has to go through the tokens, the Ravager and the Welding Jar. And he's going to run out of time.
Yeah, because each one of those tokens represents +2/+2 on an Arcbound Ravager. And there's still going to be this Welding Jar to protect the Ravager. This is a really, really tough spot for Andrade. He's on 17 life. It feels crazy to be talking about the game ending. But right now, Juliano Souza is actually threading a ton of damage. And we got 8 from the Thopters. We've got 2 more artifacts, 3 more artifacts, potentially. I guess he has to hold up the Welding Jar just as a little bit of defense.
The power and resilience of that Hardened Infinity deck being shown at display here. Look, Gustavo destroyed his land. He had an Instant Grudge. Against Old Affinity, maybe Instant Grudge wins the game by itself. Here, it actually didn't do nowhere near enough. Juliano keeping up the pressure. Oh, now a Nissa. +2/+2 to everyone.
Yeah. The minus ability on Nissa would normally give a 1+1/+1 counter to each creature in play. With Hardened Scales in play, that's 2 counters. We've got a bunch of 3/3s flying in here. This is danger zone because those flyers are very difficult for Gustavo to answer here. And there's the potential for, yep, the Arcbound Ravager's getting in as well. It's got 6 counters on it. It can sacrifice itself to put 8 counters on a creature. I don't see how Gustavo gets out of this one.
No, Juliano went off. What a great deck, Hardened Infinity. And yeah, Juliano's just playing safe. Like he could move the counters to a Thopter and present Leto, but he has no reason to do that actually. So just gonna pass the turn. He has that Welding Jar. He has a Planeswalker.
All right, looks like it's going to be Bloodbraid Elf, hoping to hit, I guess, Ancient Grudge, finds a Molten Rain. That's not going to be enough.
No, this matchup felt like a total mismatch for Gustavo. Yeah.
There is the handshake. Juliano Souza winning the match with Hardened Affinity. We've got a chance to see already some very cool tech in our feature match area. Hardened Affinity, that's a list that we've seen do some small amount of work, but I think its main work's still ahead. And then, of course, we saw Worship earlier in the round, that buying enough time for our green-white deck to build its combo. There is a lot of nice play going on here in Brazil in this modern format, and of course we have a lot of Magic still to bring you. This is still just round 1 here in Sao Paulo, Lucas, and we will be bringing you each and every round in addition to our unlimited draft at the end. But we're going to get a chance to jump back to our feature match area again and bring you still more Magic before we get to our round 2, as we're going to get a little bit more time walk. That was the match that we just saw, so we're going to see if we can just jump across and bring you the other match.
That's game 1 again.
Yeah, this is game 1 of the match that we had just a mere moment ago. So we'll see if we can just make sure that we get that switched across. So here was our game 2. Do we have... Well, we definitely don't have a game 3 from that match.
Right.
We might potentially have a game 1 or 2 or 3, for that matter, from one of our other matches on the table. Of course, we were able to record a whole bunch of Magic from our feature match area here in round 1.
Yeah, what a way to start Grand Prix. Definitely on a high note.
This is what we saw already, so we're going to see if we can jump across and just making sure that we got everything sorted out on the back end here. But we do believe that we should have a little bit more time walk for you. We will do our best to dig it out. But you can see a lot of players walking around the room now. Even when we finished our main match, there was not too much time left on the clock, so it will not be long before we get a chance to see our round 2. We're going to get a chance to see a little bit more Magic from yet another match in our feature match area.
Okay.
This is game 2 of Vinicius Souza against Nicolas Monzon. Burn against Control. 2 very, very different philosophies here, and it was the Burn list that was able to pick up game 1 for Souza here. I think that the Control lists, we were talking before at the top of the show about how Control has a lot of different things that it needs to find a way of beating. In game 1, it's a really rough matchup for Control because essentially every spell does the same thing, which is about 3 damage, and sooner or later you just end up taking 20 points of damage. And here we see Souza on turn 1, he gets down Goblin Guide, one of the premium things that you can play on turn 1 because it represents potentially more than just 2 damage. Monzon here with a blue mana. I struggle to see him actually stopping that damage. Instead just plays an Opt, and this is potentially going to be another quick win for Burn here if he's able to if Souza is able to carry on with these early damage sources.
Yeah, right. So Blue-White Control has some good things going for it. It usually doesn't take too much damage from its own lands. But at this particular matchup, it's very reliant on how much Nicolas wants to beat it with their sideboard cards. There's some hands with Burn that are reliant on creatures, and maybe Nicolas can get an early Terminus and win the game that way. But otherwise, Blue-White doesn't have a fast clock. It really needs to play cards like Timely Reinforcements from the sideboard to beat that Burn deck. Actually, I think at Grand Prix Barcelona, it was one of the matchups at the quarterfinals, and Burn won that one too.
So, Goblin Guide revealing that there are more Opts in Nicolas Monzon's future. Now, he has got a Flooded Strand, so if he wished, he could shuffle away that instant. As things stand, though, his main concern right now, I would guess, is just the damage that's coming through. He does use the Flooded Strand because he does not want to draw Opt.
Okay, so Nicolas here, he's probably thinking that his mana is going to be stranded on the next few turns, so he doesn't want that Opt necessarily. It's very important for him that he has a removal spell for that Goblin Guide too.
Fetches a Hallowed Fountain. I'm guessing that this is going to be tapped because it's a gigantic hit if it's not.
Yeah, so Goblin Guide is going to get 2 more damage. Nicolas, I think he has a very strong hand for what I can see. Just I can see exquisite Firecraft. It's an important piece of technology. Because of Spell Mastery, it is uncounterable. And the way the games usually play out, when Blue-White stabilizes, it's going to stabilize at a low life total. Then you present an uncounterable removal spell that's usually enough to finish the game. Nicolas doesn't have his ideal start now. He really didn't want to take the 2 hits from Goblin Guide.
There's also a Skullcrack potentially as a great way of making sure that he can prevent any life gain coming from the Blue-White Control list.
Yeah, so now he finally has an answer for that Goblin Guide, and if he has not a removal spell, then that Gideon can start attacking, and you need to take turns away from Burn, so that's very important play for Nicolas.
I mean, it kind of is. That Goblin Guide has, as a 1 mana spell, dealt 4 damage though, which is a little above average for what you're looking for in the Burn deck. And we saw a Boros Charm there, dealing 4 damage, able to deal with Gideon. Now along comes Goblin Guide, continuing to get stuck in here. And Souza here, he's hitting all of his land drops. That looks like a good thing for most decks in most situations. At some point for Burn decks, though, like 3 is almost high watermark for a lot of Burn lists.
Yeah, I think Nicolas is in a little bit of trouble, unless he has one of those potent sideboard cards that he can find in the next few turns. Vinicius is just going to keep throwing Burn at him and keep attacking him with Goblin Guide.
Yep, Skullcrack going to the head here. At some point, these Burn players, it's more important to get the damage in and be mana efficient each and every turn, casting all your spells, than it is to try and trap your opponent in the moment where you can get full value from those Skullcracks. Judging where to do one or the other is one of the reasons that actually Burn, not quite the sort of, oh, this is an easy deck to play, that I think a lot of players might assume from looking at the list from the outside in.
Yeah, I agree with you, Tim. Some games are very straightforward, but the games that aren't, It comes down to knowing how to use your mana, knowing how to play stuff, and knowing how to choose between them. I think Vinicius is making the right choice here. I think his main constraint here is mana, not cards.
Yeah, and I would actually go as far as saying that for players looking to level up their Magic, you should play a burn deck for at least a little while, because what it does to your threat assessment, what it does to your sort of ability to look a few turns ahead in terms of your clock and plan out your turns is actually very important to your sort of overall shape as a Magic player. It's a very cool deck, and something that right now seems pretty well positioned with Nicholas Monzon on just 9 life remaining. And I think we're beginning to approach the exquisite Firecraft stage of the game. Right now there's a Molten Rain though. That one is going to get met by some kind of a response from Monzon. Looks like a Logic Knot there, exiling a couple of cards from the graveyard to be able to make sure that that spell is countered.
Right, so Nicholas at 9 is not a healthy life total, but it gives him some maneuverability. I think he's at a position where, oh, that's huge.
So Sphinx's Revelation, that is life gain, it is card drawing, it is exactly what Monzon was looking for. He only has 4.5 minutes left on the clock, though. The game 1 must have taken an absolutely huge amount of time. A game down against Burn with 4 minutes left. The best that he can hope for is a draw here, and even that seems optimistic.
Yeah, I think Nicholas made the wise choice of casting that Sphinx Revelation when Vinicius was tapped out. He's still far away from closing the game. He needs a threat soon. He can just defend himself.
Cryptic Command on a Rift Bolt there. I guess that you use your counter magic where you can.
Right.
Exquisite Firecraft, you can't use counter magic on that one. Down to just a couple of points of life here. Vinicius Souza, essentially every card in his deck, almost barring land, ought to be able to do it here.
Yeah, you can see kind of by his body language, like he's not even looking at his hand anymore.
That's Gideon Jura coming down.
Okay, that attacks. That's good.
It also, in this turn, means that a creature wouldn't be enough, but another Exquisite Firecraft, most definitely enough. Burn taking things down here against Blue-White Control. Blue-White Control, a list that was likely made more popular from the finishes that we saw in Barcelona for it, but at least in that instance, in that match, not really the deck that you wanted to have in the tournament. We will have plenty more Modern for you soon enough. Do not go anywhere. It's going to be Riley, it's going to be PV, it's going to be round 2. But first, these messages.